you today?
I'm down in the San Francisco Bay Area, West Coast also.
Okay, all right. You're not that far away from me.
Nope.
How is it down there today?
Our weather has dried up. We wish we can't get enough rain, but it's looking like a lovely day today.
Well, that's nice to know. Tell me about 2080 strategy. What 2080 strategy execution? What does that do? What do you do there?
Yeah, so 2080 strategy execution, we work with organizations and the people in those organizations to help improve workplace performance, and we really look at it through a lens of project-based work. So this notion that most work that gets done in organizations today is done in teams, and it's project-based, and so there's some implications for leadership, for organizations on a grander scale, and we really immerse ourselves in that whole area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are you seeing in the current business environment? There's some trends going on?
Yeah, there's certainly some big trends that we're all hearing about relative to big data and data security, the global interconnectedness, speed and rate of change. When we take that down to how that's really practically impacting organizations, there's three that really jump out at us in particular, although we've got a number of different insights. But in particular, more and more this move towards lean and flat organizations. So whether you're a large global organization like an Apple or a Microsoft or a local business, there's a move towards asking people to take more responsibility relative to decision-making and pushing decision-making, if you will, out to the edges. And that has implications for leadership in the organization, and it has implications for fundamentally how you get work done.
Mm-hmm. Does that also pose a few risks? I mean, if you're delegating more, there's also a chance that some employees aren't going to do exactly things that the way they maybe should be done.
Oh, absolutely, a great point. And in fact, many managers and leaders, it's not only a risk, but there is a fear that of what can happen. And fundamentally, we find that's really critical. Is how do you create an environment where both the leadership trusts, but the individual trusts that they can take some risks. It very much has to do with the kinds of practices and a culture that's employed, whereby do you look from, institutionalize, and learn from some of those attempts. And also you have to be relevant to the type of business you're in. Nobody wants to know that there's risk-taking at, say, a nuclear power plant, but right. People will understand if you're building software and you're taking some risks to try and improve your ability to meet customer needs. Certainly certain bugs are not acceptable, but other features maybe aren't developed in time. Customers may be a little more understanding if they realize that you're trying to be innovative and push the envelope. And that's another key trend we're seeing is this push towards how can organizations and individuals look to be more agile and innovative, and at the same time there's this interesting dynamic of balancing just the right amount of discipline with the right amount of agility.
Does that mean that clarity and communication are even more important now than they always have? And they always say that communication is one of the things that gets lost in a big business. But clarity, being clear about what you want, what you expect, and just how far an employee can go, say, in being innovative and taking risks. The communication is paramount there. Absolutely, because you have to understand as an individual, as a person in an organization, what is acceptable. Some organizations structurally and culturally are more command and control, and that may be very appropriate for the type of business and what they're trying to engage in, and then leaders can manage that way. Other organizations, it's one thing to say, we're going to be innovative, we're going to be more creative, we're going to be more agile. That suggests, though, that the fundamental practices need to change. If you're asking people to stand up and in 15 minutes talk about what they've accomplished for the day and do that on a regular basis, that has pretty profound implications for what you expect of your leaders and your managers versus if they came from that command and control, say as I do type of environment. Mm-hmm. So what should business leaders be on the lookout for in 2016? What should be on their minds?
I think this notion of how work gets done and really paying attention to the context, we like to say, and that really is what's happening in the external environment that impacts your business, but also within your organization. And again, thinking about, do I have to make some adjustments to the way I'm leading the organization? Also, in terms of the direction you're taking, given that change is occurring so frequently, in many cases, that mindset that you're trying to instill in your organization needs to take mid-course corrections. So not just the words that you say, but again, what is it you're actually doing and the behaviors that you're expecting of individuals. Certainly as more millennials are moving into the workforce, it becomes really contingent and incumbent on leaders to think about new and different ways, really leadership versatility, if you will, in terms of how they're going to lead the workforce.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to inspiring their employees, it comes from top down, doesn't it? It really depends on who's at the top and how they effectively communicate their aspirations and goals to their workforce, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple of colleagues that I get to work with Stanford University. Bob Sutton and Huggy Rao released a book this year called Scaling Up Excellence, and they talk about one of the practices, spreading a mindset, not just a footprint. And it really highlights the fact that leaders, regardless of the side of the organization, have to continually think about what is that vision, that long-range intention that they have for the organization, but then connecting those dots so that people feel that what I'm working on today, which is not always easy to make that connection, but I am having an impact. The ability to make those connections with that longer-term vision can be really powerful in terms of improving organizational performance.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me a few examples of companies that are getting it right now?
Well, certainly, it really varies from large companies to small companies. You hear about the Facebooks and the Apples, and one thing you can say is whether it's the public face they're putting in terms of their marketing campaigns or when you get an opportunity to go inside, you realize that this kind of cultural immersion, this immersion in terms of their values are very real. So, it's not just the posters that are on the wall. One of the interesting things about Facebook is they have posters on the wall that talk about experiment often and emphasize the needs of the customer. Those are not created by corporate communication. Those are actual employees who create those and put those up. Other types of things, technology, certainly we talk a lot about a trend being pushing technology into the workplace and enabling people, recognizing that, everyone's walking around with that device in their hand. What can we do? People are consuming information that way. What can we do to provide information for people through the tools, giving them the tools to be successful, and more that's being pushed out to using technology and mobile devices and those kinds of things. So a few of the things that we're seeing relative to these issues.
Mr. Wasserman, where are millennials coming into this? How are they changing things?
Well, as they become the largest population in the workforce in the next 5 to 7 years, they have expectations relative to a workplace where there is a sense of trust and value, where they can be actually doing work that they're actively contributing and they can see that contribution. Certainly the technology piece plays in. So they have these expectations, if you will, about what's going to happen on the job. What we're finding is that, in fact, that's been shared more and more across the spectrum of employees, both from an age and a diversity standpoint. So really they're pushing, I think, a fundamental change in the workforce and in the workplace in terms of what's expected in this employee-employer contract, in terms of the environment you create, the culture you create, the tools you provide, and the transparency, if you will, that's provided. And there's a much higher expectation of the transparency now.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Wasserman, I know I'm down on time with you here, but is there anything that you want to get out that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think it's really just to recognize that the environment that we're in is not going to change. The old saying, and maybe it's not that old, but change is a constant. The only thing that's constant is change. That's very much the environment that we see organizations continuing to work in, and we're increasingly connected with technology on a global sense. So it's really important for us to pay attention to what's happening around us and to think about how do we continue to adapt to this environment.
Is that going to be harder for, say, older employees to do than, say, millennials?
Well, certainly, millennials, for instance, have grown up in a world of constant change, of massive data, and they have to, navigate their way around it even as they're going through grade schools. Their ability to access and process information some would argue is different than an older generation. If people are interested in more information, they could go to www.strategyx, that's strategyex.com.